Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch, and this is our highlights of Week 6 of the NFL action. We'll talk a little bit about Week 7. Also go into some possible trades with the trade deadline coming up on October 31st. But before we get into any of that, we'll go past and present first. First, we'll go present. It's a good name. He's done well in fantasy this year, considering the team that he's on. This team still hasn't won a game, which is the Panthers. I think he's a good household name, but I don't think a lot of people knew he went to school, which is Adam Thielen. I'll give you 2 hints, and that's all I'm going to give. The 2 hints are, the first one is, it is a school you've never heard of. It's not Power 5. I couldn't even tell you. I had to look the school up myself, and it's not something that would stand out. The second hint, which is the major hint, is with his first team in the NFL, it is a hometown school that he went to school at. So that's sort of your biggest hint that you're going to get. If you get it, it's probably because you live up there, you know this school. Outside of that, if you're not an Adam Thielen fan or you just haven't looked it up, it's incredibly difficult to get. But for those of you who want a little bit more time, go ahead and pause if you need. But now that we're here, the answer is Minnesota State. I didn't even know there was a school. So you sit back and you take a look at Minnesota State. It's pretty surprising. I looked up to see who their mascot was, and it's the Mavericks. But, he played right down the street from them. You talk about a guy that has really always been consistent in his ability to catch the football and get open. He's never wowed you with his speed, but the NFL, it's always surprising to me how many guys the NFL takes a chance on who truly can't catch the football every single time. They have amazing attributes. They're incredibly fast. They're tall. They have all these qualities that you look for, but the most important quality, which is always catching the football. And Adam has always seemed to be that guy that if you get it near him, he's going to catch it, which is why he's made it as far as he has in the league, and he's doing pretty well with the Panthers. He's starting to develop chemistry with Bryce Young. We'll see how it continues to go on throughout the year, but from a fantasy perspective, he's done pretty well. For our past, we'll go school first, which is Syracuse. After Syracuse, this guy went and played for the Eagles, the Redskins, and then the Vikings. So Syracuse, Eagles, Redskins, Vikings. First big hint, draft was 1999. First round, he was the second overall pick in the 1999 NFL draft. The other big hint is this guy went to a Super Bowl and went to multiple championship games for their respective conference, but never won a Super Bowl. Only been to one, but lost. If you need a little bit more time, go ahead and pause. The answer is it's Donovan McNabb. This surprised me, mainly because of when you go and you look at Syracuse and you start to figure out how many amazing players came out of Syracuse. All the way back in the day, you got Jim Brown. Even present day, you got Marvin Harrison. Syracuse has produced a lot of talent that sort of gets overlooked. I know for me, growing up, late 90s, early 2000s, Syracuse was still, Big East. Before the Big East fell apart, they were a dominant school back in the day. Donovan McNabb, I think, is one of probably the more undervalued quarterbacks out of that generation of quarterbacks. He was an amazing player. He, at the end of the day, he got the Eagles to 4 NFC championships. They lose the Super Bowl to the Patriots. You have T.O.'s ankle, all these different things that go on during that year. Andy Reid somehow gets fired after taking a team to 4 NFC championships, and you sort of wonder if he's allowed to stay. How are the Phillies now? It was almost vindictive last year of the Chiefs beating the Eagles after they gave up on Reid. I love Andy Reid. He's a great football coach, probably one of the best in the game right now, if not the best in the game right now. I know that's difficult, or a little bit easier to say with Belichick and the Patriots not doing so hot. But from a current standpoint, if you had to put one coach on an NFL roster right now, I think most people would probably lean towards Andy Reid. He's done a tremendous job. especially with the talent evaluation, who the Chiefs have been able to pick up, play. It's truly remarkable. And now that I bring up the Chiefs, we'll get right into it with the trade deadline. I wanted to go over this first. In terms of some potential players that I think could be on the move, where do I think that they may end up? I'll probably only give one location for each player just because it sort of seems to me to be the best fit. But we'll go through it. First, I'll go through the players overall. Some players that I think are going to be on the move before the trade deadline happens, which is on October 31st here in a few weeks. So, quarterback, I only got one that I think could be on the move, which is Kirk Cousins. Running back, I've only got one, which is Dalvin Cook. Wide receiver, I actually have three. Those three guys, two of them you probably would put higher on your list as being traded, with Jerry Jeudy and then Hunter Renfrow. But the third one, who I don't think has been talked that much, but I think he's in a prime position to be traded, is Mike Evans. And I'll get into that here in a second of why that is. Then I have two defensive players. These guys are Brian Burns with the Panthers, the defensive end, and then Chase Young, the defensive end with the Commanders. And we'll go right into it. So with Chase Young, the reason I think that you're looking at both Burns and Young being on the trading block is it's about their contracts. You know, they're at the end of the rookie deals. They're looking to get paid. Brian Burns has done more lately than Chase Young. However, I think that with Chase Young, you sit back and you look at the defensive line at the Commanders and you say, if you want to be honest, they don't really need Chase Young, especially at the level of performance that he's playing right now. He hasn't been as impactful as he was coming right out of college. So when I take a look at Chase Young, where I personally see Chase Young is an AFC North team. And personally, I think it's the one team that I remember there's a soundbite from the head coach of this team that was like, man, I would love to have a player like you. I just didn't want to suck as bad as a team in order to have the ability to go draft you, which I think is the Steelers. The Steelers seem to be the perfect fit for Chase Young. You have TJ Watt. You let him run free on the other side, and it enables Chase Young to come in, and you're not expecting him to be greater than TJ Watt. TJ Watt's going to do his own thing. He'll be amazing for years to come. But what you do is you start to create matchups and you start to take pressure off of TJ Watt. Yes, they're on opposite side of the lines, but what I mean by this more is that Chase Young can come out and truly play and show up, that instead of TJ Watt getting now chipped every single play by the tight end or the running back, that attention's being drawn to the other side. You're going to create a mismatch on one side of the football if both of those guys show up. The reason I say the other AFC North teams is when you sit back and you think about each of them, they each have a good pass rusher outside of the Ravens. The Ravens are probably the team that needs Chase Young or Brian Burns the most in terms of a pass rush. But the ability to pair pass rushers with Myles Garrett or with the Bengals guy, I can't think of his name right now, the big white guy that it's been pretty good for the past few years. You take a look at those guys and you say, hey, it adds a lot to this team for what, in my opinion, Chase Young would go for is maybe a third or fourth round pick at its highest. But, you know, you could probably work a fifth or a sixth round pick with certain contingencies in the deal that if he plays this much, gets this many sacks, you know, this pick jumps up to be a third round pick. He hasn't done enough to command a lot, which is different from Brian Burns. Brian Burns has played really, really well. He's in the position that you sit back and you go, I think this guy will command a lot more. And especially the Panthers, I think that what you see out of Brian Burns is, I think that this is a guy that personally is someone that could go and get a trade piece for the Panthers. The Panthers have been rumored to be on the block for a wide receiver, number one wide receiver for a while. I don't think that the definition of a number one wide receiver is going to translate to the Panthers organization this year. And the reason I say that is, it's like, who's a true number one? Like you've got Devontae Adams, you've got Justin Jefferson, Garrett Wilson with the Jets, Mike Evans with the, Buccaneers. You have guys out there that no matter what team they're on, they're the true number one guy. That This guy's going to make your team instantly better. He is the guy that's always going to draw that coverage, period. I sit back and I don't think that any of those teams are willing to let those guys go for what the Panthers are going to offer. The Panthers don't have a first-round pick this coming year. They gave it to the Bears, and the Bears are now sitting with the number 1 and number 2 overall picks. Right now, the Panthers' pick is the number 1 pick in the draft. It's just happened to go into the Bears. When you sit back and you think about them using Brian Burns, the thing that makes the most sense in my eyes is to go get a wide receiver who's not a number 1, but I think he adds a lot to their offense, and I think that they want to get him out of here. It's a guy that I already mentioned, Jerry Jeudy. Like, I can see the Panthers shipping Brian Burns, going to getting Jerry Jeudy. And when these rookie contracts happen, understand that these contracts also, the reason that it's difficult to go get trade partners and other things is that player is now expecting to be paid a certain salary. So for this trade to go down, both sides sort of have to be of the agreement. I look at Denver and I say they need a pass rusher. They trade Randall Gregory over to the Niners. Their defense is in shambles. It's clear Judy's not going to get a 5th-year option tagged onto that deal. You look at him from that standpoint, you say the Broncos are ready to get rid of Jeudy. If they can go out and get Brian Burns in return, I think it makes both sides happy. It's really about, well, what does the other side get in return? Is 1-for-1 going to be the swap, or is there going to be some draft picks that get interchanged between both squads? That's the standpoint that makes the most sense to me with the Brian Burns, is that I think that he's going to have to be traded for someone's wide receiver. The only other team that I can sit back and go, I think that this could happen, is with the Arizona Cardinals and Marquise Brown. I think he brings a lot to the Panthers in terms of speed, but in terms of production, you haven't seen it out of him. Now, you could make the exact same argument for Jeudy. You haven't seen the wealth of production come out of both of these players. The Cardinals are in a position that they sit back and they go, hey, we'll be more than happy to take him. We own, right now, I think it's being evaluated as the 4th overall pick in next year's draft. We'll see where the Cardinals end up going. I think they're going to go quarterback if Drake May's still there. But from that perspective, if the Cardinals can go out and get a great defensive end and ship Marquise Brown off, I think that they would. That's about the only way that I see Brian Burns getting traded out of there. Which brings us now to the offensive side. So I'll start running back first, since that's sort of the easiest team, in my opinion, with Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook, now that Rodgers is hurt, you sit back and you look at what Dalvin Cook's been able to do on the field, and it's not a lot. The team that I personally think he goes to is the Browns. I think it's sort of this perfect relationship that's where he should end up. With Nick Chubb going down, you trade him for, we're talking like a 6th or 7th round pick over to the Browns. The Browns are picking up just a 1-year deal on Dalvin Cook. It's sort of insurance to say, hey, Chubb, take your time. If we like this guy, if he performs, we can sign him to a small 2-year deal. Someone that's going to supplement Chubb. I don't think Dalvin Cook's going to get paid a lot. He hasn't shown a lot. But if he shows up in Cleveland and performs, it gives him the ability to say, hey, you can go test the market. We have Nick Chubb. It's a perfect scenario for the Browns that they need a really good running back. Kareem Hunt is, I would say, an average running back. I don't think he's the Kareem Hunt that we know of yesteryear. Dalvin Cook still has a lot of tank in the gas. That, to me, seems like the matchup that Cleveland loves to run the football. They should go take a chance on Dalvin Cook. The Jets would be more than happy to loose him for a 6th, 7th round pick. They have Breece Hall. They have Carter. They have other guys in that backfield that can easily take the load, and probably should, over Dalvin Cook. That's just where I think that Dalvin should end up. It makes too much sense with the Browns, especially on a 1-year deal, that Dalvin Cook could come out and perform. Then you got 3 wide receivers. So we've talked a little bit about Jeudy. It is the best scenario that I think he ends up is with the Panthers. The only other scenario with Jeudy that I think he can end up at, and I think it makes a lot of sense for this organization as much as it pains me to say it, is the Cowboys. The Cowboys, when you watch them on Sunday or on Monday night against the Chargers, you notice a team that doesn't have a number 2 wide receiver. Yes, it's Gallup right now. Gallup's not developed the chemistry either with Dak or just a route running, offense. You can say whatever you want to, but you can tell that outside of CD Lamb, they don't have a guy that they're looking to get the ball to. For me, I take a look at the Cowboys and Denver. The great thing is they're in separate conferences. So Denver shipping Judy off to the Cowboys. It's of no regard to them. They don't care. The only time they can see the Cowboys is in a Super Bowl. That's not going to happen. Denver's hurting too. They need draft picks. They need to reload for next year and be able to go find guys. I don't think it's a player swap. I think it's a pick swap with the Cowboys, but it makes a lot of sense for the Cowboys to go get Judy, to pair him up. Now you have Lamb, Gallup, and Judy on the field. I think it adds a lot to their offense. They need more help on the wide receiver side of the ball. That's just my hot take for Dallas. We'll see if it ends up happening. The next guy is Hunter Renfrow. Here's a guy that, especially in the fantasy league, and just I would argue even more from a team perspective, for the past few years has been extremely dominant with the Raiders. You take a look at last year with Adams, him, and Carr. Renfrow was the guy. I mean, he was good for at least, a half dozen catches a game almost, or at least targets, because he was everywhere. I think through, week 6, he's only caught like 5 passes. He's been severely underutilized with this offense. I sit back and I think, well, what type of player does he remind me of, and what team do I think he should go to? And this is my take for Hunter Renfrow. I think he should go to the Bills. When you look at the Bills, you've got Stephon Diggs and you have Gabe Davis, but that third wide receiver spot they don't have. For remembering just last year when they tried to bring back Cole Beasley, why? They need an under the top coverage route runner. They need someone that's just that shifty guy, just like Cole Beasley, that can match up against a linebacker, and he's this amazing check down for Josh Allen. When you think about Hunter Renfrow, he fits all those billets and more. That guy always finds a way to get open. He's extremely reliable with catching the football, works his rear end off. You have to sit back and look at Hunter Renfrow and go, I think that this is a guy that would fit extremely well within Buffalo's offense. Buffalo needs help on the offensive side of the ball too. We'll get into that here in a second when we start doing the breakdown of week 6. Buffalo's frustrated. A lot of attention's been put on Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs, and no one else is stepping up for him outside of the tight end position. Getting another wide receiver number 3 in there with Hunter Renfrow makes too much sense for me. With Hunter Renfrow, that would be my projection of where he goes and the best fit. That third wide receiver is Mike Evans. Why is Mike Evans in the conversation? Here's a guy that if he's going to get traded, it's going to be because he's going to get the contract that he wants from a new team, and the Bucs are going to get something in return, most likely just a draft pick. What do I think it's going to be? The highest is maybe a second round pick, maybe a third. The lowest would be a fourth. You look at the Adams trade. You look at other, trades throughout the years, especially with a number 1 wide receiver who's in the later end of his career of Evans. He's not, in his third year. The team that makes the most sense, that would be willing to probably give him a 3-year good salary, that I think needs a true number 1 wide receiver, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. This would immediately catapult the Chiefs into they're now the Super Bowl favorite yet again. And it's because when you watch the Chiefs, yes, he has Kelsey. And outside of that, you go, they are missing a wide receiver on the outside. Like, for so many years, they had Hill. Last year, they really got away with the fact that Juju, Watkins, other guys showed up for them. They're not showing, they don't have those guys this year. You think about the Chiefs and what Mike Evans would do for that offense. At the end of the year, they're getting rid of Jones on the defensive end, or on the defensive line, excuse me. He's going to go get paid millions by someone else. They're not going to give that money to him. From an offensive standpoint, the only 2 guys that they're really concerned about is Mahomes and Kelsey. Both of those guys are going to get paid. I can see a scenario where they bring in Mike Evans and they say, hey, if you want to win a couple more Super Bowls and be competing at the end of every year and you get paid pretty well, maybe not the best that you could get paid. I think it's a great scenario for Mike Evans and the Kansas City Chiefs. The compensation would be something that would have to be discussed, but that seems to be, to me, would be the shocker, but it seems like something the Chiefs would easily do to keep that competitive edge. It makes too much sense to me. I'd love to see it happen. We'll see what happens as the year goes on. I just think that due to Mike Evans and the Bucs not coming to a deal before the season ended, at the end of the season, he's going to demand too high of a price for the Bucs to get for them to sign him. He's going to go sign somewhere else. So if someone was to come in and make a good deal for the Bucs, I think they ship him off because they're not going to pay him at the end of the year because he's going to ask for too much. Which leaves us one guy, which is Kirk Cousins. I know that a lot of people have been talking about Kirk Cousins going to the Jets. And honestly, if that was going to happen, it would have happened before the game ever ended on Monday night against the Bills when Aaron Rodgers went down. The Jets aren't going to go get a quarterback. That's the plain and simple truth of it. Why? Because they have Aaron Rodgers. I'm not saying that in terms of Aaron Rodgers is going to come back this year, although it looks to be that way. That would be the most iconic thing in the world. We'll get into it here in a second of just sort of the prediction on that piece. But Aaron Rodgers is going to be there next year. It's clear Aaron Rodgers is coming back. There is no reason to go get Kirk Cousins. Anyone that says that doesn't understand just sort of the money cap of it all on a contract and being able to get rid of this player. It's not going to happen. They're not going to create that scenario. It should stop being talked about. The scenario of Kirk Cousins, though, of a team that I think could use him immediately, it would change their offense. It's the Falcons. When you look at the Atlanta Falcons and you think about who they are as a team, they are eerily similar to the Vikings minus having a Justin Jefferson. They have Bijan, they have Algier, they have Drake London, they have Kyle Pitts. They have talent on the offensive side of the football, and Kirk Cousins has performed very well statistically this year. And if you sit back and you go, would you rather have Desmond Ridder or would you ever have Kirk Cousins? I'll take Kirk Cousins every single day and twice on Sundays. It's not close. The ability for the Falcons to go get a senior quarterback, as I would like to call him, who I still think has at least 4 to 5 years left in the tank, is everything the Falcons could want. And if they went out and got Cousins right now, I'd predict the Falcons to win the division just because they have talent. Like, the Falcons are a good football team this year. I didn't think that going into the season, but when you watch them, you have to sit back and go, the Falcons are playing pretty well. I can see Kirk Cousins going there. It makes too much sense, especially with Justin Jefferson now going down with a hamstring injury. Who knows when he's going to come back? The Vikings are only probably a few weeks from really being out of the playoff race, especially if they lose to the Lions. If the Lions can find ways to put away the Vikings and sort of claim hold on the division, Minnesota's time's ticking. I just look at the next 2 weeks. If the Falcons were smart, they'd go get Kirk Cousins. They're not going to get a high enough draft pick to go get another rookie. It's clear Desmond Ridder's holding his offense back. That's my hot take with the Kirk Cousins trade drama. But now that we've gotten into that, we'll get right into sort of what happened week 6, what's going to happen in the future, the bigger takeaway thoughts. You sit back and Thursday night happens with the Chiefs and Broncos, and it's surprising to me. I would have thought, and I said it last week, the Chiefs win by 20-plus points. But then I added on, the last time I thought that, the Chiefs and the Broncos went neck and neck going down. Now, it wasn't as close as that. It had opportunities to get there, and the Broncos found ways to lose the game like they have for most of the time this season. You look at the Chiefs, and this is why I say Mike Evans makes a lot of sense. They need help at the wide receiver position. They need a guy that Mahomes has a connection with, that he can throw it up to and is going to win the majority of the matchups that he's put against. When you look at, Moore, you look at other guys in that wide receiver position group, They are not winning their matchups consistently. He's finding them open, and Mahomes is making ridiculous throws. But in terms of having this guy he is the guy that's going to win the matchups. He's a matchup, mismatch for a defense that they have to sit back and worry about what this guy's doing. The only guy on that offense that they're having to worry about from a catching perspective is Travis Kelce. That's it. Outside of him, the Chiefs don't have that guy. I think the Chiefs are going to go out and make a move and try to go get that guy. The issue is that the other two guys I talked about, Judy and Renfro, both are in division. It's never going to happen. Those trades are exceptionally rare that it goes to an in-division rival, and it's usually for too high of a price. Mike Evans makes too much sense. It's not even in that same conference. That's why I bring it up. For the Chiefs, when you look at them, they are still in the best position to win that division. You watch the Chargers do Chargers things. It just sucks to see as a Chargers fan. And then it comes out that the only fans that they have are fake. Thanks NFL for pretty much paying a girl to lose her mind on the sideline, and it comes out she's been a Vikings fan for the past 20 years too. So it sort of washes up. That is the Chargers as a fan. Like, you can't make that stuff up from a Chargers perspective. The Raiders, Mike McDaniel should have been fired last year. And then you take a look at the Broncos and you go, the issue with the Broncos is you owe Russell Wilson too much money. That's the problem. Is even next year in the NFL draft, if they're sitting there and they have an ability to go get May, or let's say worst comes to worst for other teams in the league, and somehow the Broncos end up with the number one pick and they have Caleb Williams sitting there, do I think that they take him? Yeah. But the Broncos are going to be hurting for years because of the cap hit that Russell Wilson's going to put on him if they cut him. And no one's going to trade for him. No one right now wants Russell Wilson. There's not a team out there that would take him who is even quarterback needy would take Russell Wilson because he hasn't looked good at all. And you'd have to take on that contract. It's not going to happen. So from that perspective, when you look at the AFC West, it's the Chiefs. Outside of the Chiefs, there's really no one in that division right now that is saying, hey, we're going to be there by the end of the year trying to become a playoff team. I get that the Chargers have shown a lot of hope. They've lost these 3 games by 1 possession, but from the standpoint of who are the Chargers, they showed you on the field Monday night. Like, here's a team that they can't find ways to win games. Instead, they are notorious for finding ways to lose games. And it's why you just can't trust the Chargers at the end of the day. You sit back and you look at them, and then how would I sum up week 6? It was outside of the Chiefs winning, it was all the major powers losing. You've got the 49ers going down. You've got the Eagles going down. The only team that really didn't go down was the Dolphins. But then you have some real lackluster performances. You've got the Bills that just were treading water there against the Giants. Easily could have been a pass interference and should have been. There's plenty of teams out there that you sit back and you watch this past week and you go, man, they're not as good as I thought they were. Now, we had been harping, at least I had been, on the Eagles for a while, and it's showing up that the offensive play calling, only one word that describes it, sucks. You watch them and their ability to make decisions and call the correct play, it's horrendous. They go out and they get Julio Jones, which if Julio can stay healthy, he's better than any number 3 wide receiver that they have on the roster, period. And if you put him out on the field and Julio can be half the player that he was in Atlanta, watch out. Because it allows you to create mismatches on the field. For them to have A.J. Brown, Julio, and Devontae Smith on the field at the same time, someone's getting a favorable matchup. Someone is going to be open. The Eagles are a good football team. Now, a lot of it's going to come down to can Lane Johnson play. I get that they put a lot of heat on that left tackle that came in and filled in for him. It's understandable that he's not going to just walk into a game after probably not expecting to play the whole entire season and have his struggles. It makes sense. Like, it's not underestimated. And the Jets defense is very good. I would still argue that the Jets defense is one of the best in the league, if not the best defense in the league. Like, they have consistently performed well against great quarterbacks. You take a look at who the Jets have played. You think about week 1. They come out, Rodgers gets hurt, and who do they go play against? They play against Josh Allen, and they make him look bad. Like, Josh Allen did not look good week 1. Then they go play the Cowboys. They were in that game for probably the first two and a half quarters. Dallas ended up pulling away, but Dallas didn't look good in doing it. Their defense looked really good, but not their offense. New England's a terrible football team. Let's just go out and say it. Mahomes did not look good against the Jets. They only won 23-20. The Chiefs did. But the Jets defense showed that, hey, like, we were in this game. And then they go out and they win the last 2 weeks. They dominate the Broncos, make them look silly, and then they beat the Eagles. They're going into a bye week. They come out of the bye week and go play the Giants, which could not have been a better chance for their defensive line of the Jets to humiliate another offensive line of the Giants. Giants probably have the worst offensive line in all of football this year, which is, it's honestly saying something with how bad some of the offensive lines are out there. But from that perspective, you sit back and you look at some of these major teams and you go, some of these other teams that they're losing to, like, I get it. The Jets and the Browns historically have been bad teams. They are very two good defensive teams this year. Myles Garrett was unblockable, and it wasn't like he was not going against Trent Williams. He went against Trent Williams all game long, and he won. He won a majority of those matchups. Now, I get that people are going to sit back and go, oh, well, this is what Brock Purdy looks like when you don't have Deebo Samuel or Christian McCaffrey. Name another team that if you put Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey on and then took out their 2 best offensive players, that quarterback's going to look the same. Get real. Like, even Tom Brady, if you were to sit back and go, hey, we're going to take away Chris Godwin and Mike Evans or Gronk during your Super Bowl run, and now you keep looking the exact same player, it's not going to happen. Like, there's going to be a degrade. When you take an offense's 2 best players off the field, it's going to look different, and probably not for the better. Like, that is part of the NFL, is that you have guys that contribute so much that when they're not on the field, it shows immediately. That's why I just sit back and I look at it now. It looks like Deebo and Christian McCaffrey are both going to be fine. Both are trending up at playing this week's game. They get a great Monday night matchup against the Vikings, a team that's hurting, doesn't have Justin Jefferson. I think it's going to be a great rebound game for the 49ers. But both of those teams, you sit back and you look at and you go, hey, I think that they have the ability to bounce back in a very good way. And we'll just get right into it with the Eagles. You take a look at the division. They're 5-1. They have an ugly loss against the Jets, which I don't count. I know I just said it's an ugly loss. That's how a lot of people view it, but I personally don't, because of the fact that the Jets have a really good defense. The Eagles, the reason it's an ugly loss is because of how their offense played in terms of turnovers. The Eagles had chances to win that game. Even there at the end, the Eagles have the ball winning. They have the ball. Jalen forces a pass, which gets picked, and it allows the Jets to be right in a position to score and to win the game. And the minutes go in the game. Like, you just sit back and you see that level of decision making, and for me, that's where I blame an offensive coordinator. The other thing about the Eagles that I'm not liking right now is they are unable to pick which running back they want to be their workhorse. For me, it would be Swift. I think Swift is that guy. I think they really like Gainwell, and I think they like the things that he brings to the team. However, from that perspective, you get guys out of rhythm. Like, you're not allowing them to really – a running back takes, probably a dozen carries before they're really comfortable in the offense for that game of just running. And when you're subbing guys in and out, this idea that, like, hey, whoever we sub in, he's going to find the open hole. He's just going to be in frequency with the rest of the team and go. It's a farce. It just doesn't happen. You have to have a primary back, and then you have to have guys that come in and substitute. Look at the Chiefs. Like, Isaiah Pacheco, he's the guy that's going to run the football. but they use Clyde Edwards-Helaire and McKinnon to substitute with Pacheco to put them into great positions, especially on passing downs and other things, to help out. And sure, those guys will get 1 or 2 carries, but at no point is anyone going to out-touch Pacheco from the running perspective. You look at the Eagles and you can't say that. That's why I say when you look at the first few games, Swift's the guy that's running the best. Give him the football. Let Keenwell and those guys come in and substitute and be the McKinnons to that team. But until they figure out the offensive play calling, the Eagles are going to continue to struggle. But we'll see how it goes on. Dallas, you sit back. I love the meme that came out. It was, Peter Griffin off of Family Guy holding the Denny's menu up, and it looks just like Coach McCarthy. And you look at Dallas, yet again, they won the game. Give them credit. They beat the Chargers in SoFi Stadium. Dallas isn't a good football team. They have good players, but the reason I say they're not a good football team is, yes, are they better than the Patriots? 100%. I'm not going to argue that. Are they better than the Panthers? Yeah, 100%. Can't argue that. When you put them against true NFL talent, if you were to put them against the Eagles, if you were to put them against the Lions or the Chiefs or the 49ers, we already saw what happened against the 49ers. Dallas can't compete, especially on the offensive side of the football. Tony Pollard is a good running back, but I don't think that teams are really scared of their running game right now. They haven't shown the ability to run the football very effectively this year. And then you look at the wide receiver core and you go, outside of CeeDee Lamb, they don't have anybody. Period. Like, Gallup's a good, wide receiver number 3, but he's not your number 2 guy. Like, he's a mismatch when you get him on a linebacker, but that's not the matchups he's getting. He's getting put on, their number 2 corner. And the reason Gallup showed up in years prior is because they had Amari Cooper. When you had Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Gallup drew that favorable matchup that got him open a lot of times. But now that you're expecting him to go up and start beating the number 2 corner instead of, the outside linebacker or safety, it's not happening. It just shows that he wasn't this dominant force. He just got favorable matchups when Cooper was there in the building. And then you have the Commanders and the Giants. At the end of the day, yes, Sam Howell he's Mitch Trubisky all over again, in my opinion. Like, he shows games that you're like, hey, this guy played pretty well. And then he'll show games that you're like, man, we need to go find another quarterback. I just sit back and look at that franchise and I go, they're in a rut, and I don't know how they're going to get out. I think they're going to have wholesale changes at the head coaching position of Rivera at the end of the year. Do they get rid of Sam Howell? No, I think he's probably shown enough that he keeps sticking around. Sort of like Trubisky is, they just kept hanging on, going, hey, hopefully this guy shows up. And in the times that he doesn't, now you have a whole group of guys that are 3 to 4 years older than they were right now. And instead of making the moves right now to go find someone, I think the Commanders will hold on to him. They'll just sort of be a run-of-the-mill team that will surprise a few teams throughout the year. But at the end of the day, they're a 6-10 squad, maybe, and now with the 17 games, 6-11. That's sort of how I view the Commanders this year. And then the Giants, you sit back and look at them. Tyrod Taylor played pretty well against the Bills, and I would love to sit back and give the Giants more credit. I sort of ding the Bills more. We'll get into that here in a second. The Giants need more help than anyone else. And you sit back and you look at their roster and what they're able to do and what the future looks like for the Giants. It's a mess. They paid Daniels all that money, and you sit back and Daniel Jones, all that money, and you sit back and you go, I don't know what they're going to get in return for it. They are a franchise that at the end of the day is always going to be competing for either the 3rd and the 4th spot in that division for the next few years. And it's just because they've spent money in places that you can't get it back. And now that it's spent, you can't upgrade the rest of the roster. They're just in turmoil. Now, we just talked about the Bills, and I'll get right into it. I texted my buddy who's a huge Buffalo Bills fan, and he literally was like, now you understand why watching them has been the greatest struggle of my life. Like, and you sit back and you think about that statement. It's so true. The Bills on paper should be such a good football team offensively. Like, they have all these pieces and they're just inconsistent. I think about last week when they played Jacksonville, and it was like they were in net for the first 3 quarters, and then at the end of the game, it's like they can't be stopped. And you're like, well, where was this team all week? And then they come out against the Giants, and you're just like, where is the offense? Like, this Giants team is not good. And it's like they walked into it thinking that, hey, we're 14-point favorites. We're going to, dominate the Giants. And it was a game the whole time and came down to the very end. It's something that you're not wanting to see out of the Bills. Like, at the end of the day, the Bills are going to have to play the Jets again, and they got to go play the Dolphins. And what's funny is they showed up against the Dolphins. And it's like, you can't show up against the Dolphins and win and then go and play the Giants and look horrendous. Like, who is this team? Because eventually you're going to get into I still think the Bills are a playoff team. But you sit back and you watch them and you go, man, like, y'all have got to show me something more that say y'all are ready to compete for a Super Bowl this year. Because right now it looks like a first round, wild card or divisional week knockout of the playoffs. Sort of like last year when they played the Bengals that no one really saw coming. But that's sort of the offense that you're seeing right now. The same offense that you saw against the Bengals last year in the playoffs is the exact same team you're seeing this year. For the Dolphins, you sit back and you think of them, it's hard not to love the Dolphins. You look at their offense, you look at what they're able to do. Tua's playing exceptionally well. Yes, they played the Panthers. The Panthers aren't a good football team. I actually like the fact that they got down 14 early to the Panthers. Like, it showed a team that wasn't, old Dolphins would have just been like, it would have been a battle to the end and they may have squeaked it out. But before you knew it, the Dolphins are back in the league. They immediately threw up the points. They actually pulled out Tua being up 3 scores. The backup quarterback comes in, throws a pick 6. They eventually get it back with the backup QB. But from that perspective, the Dolphins are a very good football team. You sit back and you look at them. I don't think that yes, the Bills have beat them once. That's going to be a huge game. The Dolphins have to play the Jets twice. That's sort of the game that I'm really watching coming up for the Dolphins. Is that when they play a really, really good defense, how does that offense look? That's what I'm really wanting to see. They didn't play so well against the Bills a few weeks ago. Against the Jets, what does that team look like? And the reason I also bring up this game against the Jets, for me, the Jets, if they have any chance of making the playoffs, which I think they still do, you sit back and you look at their record, they're 3-3 right now. If you told me that Aaron Rodgers goes out on the 4th play of the game and that the Jets would be 3-3 going into week 7, I would say, Zach Wilson really showed up, and it's really their defense. Here is the crazy scenario that could happen, and if it does, it would talk about just some fairy tale moments. Rodgers is throwing a football without crutches. Now, I get he wasn't running around. He's not putting a lot of weight on it. It's almost, I don't want to say gimmick, but at the same time, it's far more than I would say you would ever expect out of a guy who just had Achilles surgery. It's amazing. Like, at the end of the day, it's amazing. The only reason I say gimmick is it's not to the level that he's close to getting back on the field. Like, he still has months of rehab behind him. That being said, though, Rodgers has made it very clear he's trying to do everything in his power that if the Jets were to get into the playoffs, that Rodgers can play. If the Jets can win enough, I think that they have to at least split the series with the Dolphins and win one of them, and then beat the Bills and the Pats in their final 2 matchups against those teams each. If the Jets can do that, the Jets can sneak into the playoffs in the AFC. And if the Jets sneak in and somehow Rodgers' Achilles is strong enough in order for him to play, watch out. Like, that's all I'll say about the Jets right now. I know that's sort of high hopes. They were my Super Bowl pick going into the year. Maybe it's a little bit of bias. But I sit back and I look at the Jets and I say, if they are able to just hang on enough to sneak into the playoffs and somehow Rodgers finds a way to play, good luck. Like, there is no higher momentum that will be on that team than the Jets. I would hate to play them come playoff time if Rodgers finds a way to get healthy. Then you look at the Pats. There's people calling for not only Mac Jones's head, but Bill Belichick's. And the organization is it's a hot mess. Like, there's no clear way out of this, in my opinion. They're not going to hold a high enough draft spot to go get a really good quarterback next year. You sit back and look and say, well, even if they did go get May or they got another guy, would he really be the solution to this team? I think the thing with Belichick teams that a lot of people forget is think about who on a Super Bowl winning squad that Brady had was his best wide receivers. They never went out and got anybody. Like you go Edelman. Well, Edelman was, super late draft pick. Gronk. No one thought Gronk was going to be any good coming out of Arizona. The Patriots got him on a steal. You think about Deion Branch, all these other guys. The guy that people come to mind when you go, hey, who was the greatest wide receiver Brady ever played with? It was Randy Moss, who was coming out of miserable years in Oakland. The Patriots have always been that. They're either going to find a guy super late in the draft or they're going to go get a guy who's been playing on a roster for a little bit, sort of like they went out and got Juju Smith this year, thinking that, hey, we're going to get this guy into a resurgence part of his career. All those, and they've not only done it at the wide receiver position, but they usually do it throughout the team. It hasn't happened. A lot of people are going to sit back and go, well, this is what happens when Tom Brady isn't there, which is partly true, and I would say it is a big piece of the puzzle, but it's not the largest piece of the puzzle. It's that a lot of these guys just aren't showing up. Like, you look at Mac Jones before they take that safety. He hits Parker in stride in the hands on the sideline one play before the safety that would have put them in a position that they are within 10 to 15 yards of being in field goal range. To win the game, to at least, get the game back into a position where you can tie it. If not, try to go down and score and win. The Patriots aren't having the other guys step up. Like, the only guy that they've went out and gotten free agency that has shown anything is Matthew Judon. But outside of him, you look at the rest of the roster, it's not just Mac Jones or Bill Belichick. The rest of the roster is in shambles. Now, a lot of that falls on Belichick's head in terms of he's the guy that's building the roster. I just don't think that them going out and getting a new head coach is going to solve all the Patriots' problems, or even getting a brand new quarterback is going to solve their problems. They have far more problems than just those two positions, and those two positions being changed are not going to fix anything for the Patriots. Sticking in the AFC, you take a look at the AFC North. You've got Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Cincy. The real question to come out of this is, can Cincy make a rebound? They beat Seattle. Did not really see that coming. I thought Seattle, coming off a bye, would have looked a lot better against Cincinnati. Didn't show up. Cincinnati made them pay. If Cincinnati can continue to get the ball downfield, and that's been the biggest change. The first few weeks, they were unable to get the deep ball going, and now that they've got the deep ball going, especially with Chase, you sit back and go, if they can keep it going, I pick them to win the division. They are one game out of it. Cincy sitting at 3-3, Baltimore sitting at 4-2, Cleveland and Pittsburgh are both sitting at 3-2 respectively. You look at both of those franchises, all those franchises, and you go, who has the best quarterback? It's Burrow. Now, who has the best defense? It's Cleveland. Cleveland has the best defense. I don't know what's going on with Watson. Like, he's been medically cleared by the staff to play, but they don't want him to throw unless he feels zero pain. You don't know what you're going to get out of this guy when he comes back. And without him, they beat the 49ers. Now, you can call that, a blind squirrel finding a nut every once in a while in the woods. I don't know. I think that their defense showed up well enough against the 49ers that they forced that game into their hands, and the defense won that game. But if Watson can just come out and play at any point of the level that he played with the Texans, the Browns have a great chance to win that division. I still think the Browns are my playoff team out of that division. If I had to give another chance, it's to the Bengals, that the Browns and Bengals both go to the playoffs out of the division. I don't like Pittsburgh. I don't like Pickett until they prove to me otherwise. Taking a look at this upcoming week for Pittsburgh, they're playing the Rams. I think the Rams are favored by 3. I think it's going to be more than 3. I don't see Pittsburgh's offense being able to compete with any team this year. They are the Atlanta Falcons of the AFC. They have quarterback problems, and until they solve the quarterback problems, they're not going to be a good football team. Which leaves the Ravens. The Ravens' biggest issue is they're banged up. They have too many injuries on both sides of the football, especially at the defensive corner position. They've gotten sort of lucky because they haven't played a whole lot of teams that have, you think about their last few wins, the Titans, the Colts were able to swing one by them. The Colts really don't have a lot of wide receiver, and then you got the Browns. They've been able to keep teams at bay because they haven't went against a really explosive offense. But when the Ravens start to get against better opponents going forward, that you sit back and you go, well, how are they going to fare against someone that's actually able to throw the football pretty consistently? This week's a big test for them. They play the Lions. This is sort of the game of the week for me because I think it shows a lot about the Lions, of who the Lions are, but then at the same time, it really tells you, are the Ravens there defensively? Can they compete with a Lions offense that I would say it's probably playing one of, if not the best in the National Football League right now? The only other team that you could probably sit back and say offensively is competing with the Lions is the 49ers. Now, without McCaffrey or Debo, you saw the degrade. I look at the Lions and I just say, I don't think anybody wants to play this team offensively. The Lions are a good offensive team. And we'll jump right into the NFC North with the Lions. The Lions have a stranglehold on this division. If the Lions can just not do historic Lions things, the Lions are going to win this division, hands down. Green Bay's not going to compete against them. Minnesota's surely not going to compete against them, and neither are the Bears. So, you got Fields who's going out. It's becoming a dumpster fire with the Bears. It's like they have 2 good weeks, and now they're back to being the Bears. I have a buddy who's a huge Bears fan, and this is the question I asked him, which is, if you were to take Fields right now or Caleb Williams, who would you want to take? And it's a great question. He would say Caleb Williams. There's too much potential. And the reason I think Caleb Williams is the correct answer is that when you look at any aspect that involves throwing a football, Caleb Williams grades higher than Justin Fields has, or has even proven that he's capable of so far with the Bears. From an athleticism and running perspective, Fields grades higher, but those are not the 2 qualities that I'm trying to go out and get in a quarterback. I need a guy that throws the football exceptionally well. The Bears have always hit or missed on a quarterback historically. When I asked my buddy, I was like, would you rather take Fields in his prime or McMahon in his prime? And he was like, I'd probably take McMahon. McMahon was just that gutty guy, found ways to win. And I was hoping that he would say that, because when you look at the Bears and you think that McMahon's the greatest quarterback to ever come out of the division, no other team, if you would say, hey, take the best player to ever play for your respective team, the other 31 NFL organizations, none of them would trade their guy for McMahon. McMahon, if you ranked all quarterbacks as who's the best quarterback to ever play for your team and then rank them, McMahon is dead last in 32. It's not really a shot at McMahon. I sort of put him as, if I had made a historical perspective, he's the Trent Dilfer of the 85 Bears. Both Trent Dilfer and McMahon won because their defenses won the game. Their job was to just not lose the game for them. Plain and simple. They had too much firepower on the defensive sides to lose football games, and it won them the Super Bowl for both organizations. I sit back and I look at the Bears, and it's a race to get to the top of the draft and figure out what they're going to do. In my opinion, it's take Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. You sell out in free agency and go get as many offensive linemen as you can, the best of the best, try to protect Caleb Williams, and you just try to outscore everyone his rookie year. That's what I end up doing. For the Vikings, you sit back and you go, without Justin Jefferson, it's a completely different team. Plain and simple. They showed a lot of struggles last week against Chicago. It's going to continue to struggle. You don't know where. Every hamstring injury is different. And the reason I say this is I've strained my hamstring a time or two playing. It's such an easy muscle to re-aggravate, and when it's re-aggravated, you're not playing. Like this, it's not an injury that you just turn it on and run full speed. You can just play through the pain. Your hamstring does not allow you to do that for anyone who's never played the game. With Jefferson being out, the Vikings are not a good football team. They're competing with the Bears and the Packers to end up see who's going to get dead last in the division. And from the Packers, you sit back and look at them, they get a good test this weekend. And the reason I say it's a good test, they're playing the Broncos. And it's this game. Right now, the Packers are only a 1-point favorite. And I think that says so much about where they're at offensively. They come out week 1 and everyone's like, Love is the guy. It looks amazing versus the Bears. And from that point forward, Love has continued to look worse and worse. He makes good plays every now and then, but from a perspective of you sit back and you go, man, we really thought this guy was our guy. Now teams are looking at it and saying, I don't know who Love truly is, and if he's that guy that you sit back and go, I think he can win us the majority of the games going out from here on out. The Packers are in a bad position. Most of the teams in the NFC outside of the Lions, they're just not great football teams. The Lions have the stranglehold in the division. My question for the Lions going forward, I don't see them making any big moves at the trade deadline. The only move they can make is at the position of corner. I think teams are going to ask too much for a really good corner for them to trade that, and I don't think the Lions want to give up draft capital for corner when they could take someone next year in the draft. We'll see. I just look at the Lions and say their goal as a team is to try to get home field advantage. And it's because going into Detroit will be so much better for the Lions in the playoffs than them having to go into Philly or go to San Francisco. If they can hemorrhage that possibility and keep it in Detroit, the Lions have a great chance to reach the Super Bowl for the playoffs. But if they can't avoid Philly and San Francisco, it's not saying that it's impossible. It's just going to be hard to be done. And we'll hop right into San Francisco. You take a look at that division. It's still all really good football teams. That's San Francisco, Seattle, the Rams, and the Cardinals are all competing. Yes, the Cardinals are 1-5. They haven't won the games, but they've been in every game. You just sort of look at these teams and you say, I'd hate to play any of them. Like they're not teams that you want to see coming up on the roster or on the schedule. I'm interested to see this week's games because the Cardinals play Seattle. And for me, it's a great test for Seattle to say, who is the Seattle team? Like they come out, they look bad against Cincy. If Seattle was to drop the game to the Cardinals, I'd be more prone to saying Seattle's not a playoff team this year. We'll see how it goes this week. It's a great matchup. Seattle's picked by 8. I'm picking the Cardinals with a spread. I think it's going to be closer than 8. Maybe that's just a little bit of bias, but we'll end up seeing how it shakes out this week for the Cardinals and the Seahawks. Then go into the last division that we haven't talked about yet, which is the AFC South. The Jags are playing on Thursday against the Saints this week, and it's really going to come down to how is Trevor Lawrence's knee. If he's able to play, I've got the Jags big. Right now, Vegas has got it as a 1-point spread. I don't think Vegas thinks Trevor Lawrence is going to play. If Lawrence can come out and play, they're going to win that game. New Orleans is not a good football team. And I guess, well, we haven't talked about the AFC or the NFC South. We'll get to them here just in a second. But from that perspective, it looks like Anthony Richardson's going to go down for the rest of the year with a shoulder surgery. The Titans, Ryan Tannehill looks terrible. The only team the Jags are going to compete against is the Texans. And the Texans have continued to look better each and every week. If the Texans, CJ Stroud looks amazing. Like, I love this meme that's going around. It's all these little kids singing, and it's, Ohio State quarterbacks throughout the league of just all these guys that have struggled. And the last kid, it's just his beautiful voice. The teacher is like enthralled, and it's CJ Stroud. Like that has perfectly described Ohio State quarterbacks up until this moment because CJ Stroud looks to be the real deal. And he looks to have shown so far through this season that he deserved to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft. I said that last week with just how bad Bryce Young has been playing here lately. You look at the Jags and the Texans and you say, honestly, it's a neck and neck game in terms of what you're seeing out of both squads. The Texans are playing very well offensively. I still give the edge to the Jags, but we'll see how it looks like going forward. And then for the last division that I had failed to talk about so far is the NFC South. As I talked about with the Falcons, they're a very good football team. Like, Bijan Robinson has, I think, surprised a lot of people by how well he's playing this year. But from an offensive perspective of quarterback, the Falcons are one of the worst in the division. The only guy beating them is the brand new rookie and Bryce Young. Desmond Ridder he's lost them games. Like, Desmond Ridder is the reason that they're sitting at 3-3 and not sitting at a better record, is because Ridder has failed to perform. The same could be said. The Saints, it's, as I said last week, Derek Carr, this is what you get. You just get a mediocre football team. No matter what the pieces you put on both sides of them, at the end of the day, the Saints are just this team with Derek Carr they may think about going to the playoffs, but they probably won't. Like, that's just who they are. The Panthers, it's hard to say that they're the worst team in football, but right now they're showing it being 0-6. They go into a bye. We'll see. Or they don't go into a bye. They go into a bye this week. Excuse me. Panthers go into a bye. They need it pretty bad. Do I think that it improves anything for them going forward? No. Like, the Panthers are going to continue to struggle for the rest of the season. Tampa Bay sitting there at 3-2 with Baker. Tampa Bay has a good defense. They have a good offense. I still would put Tampa Bay as my favorite to win the division, just because of the other teams in the division and how poorly they've played so far. I know that's a lot that we broke down. We talked about some trades, just the overall teams. A little bit of last week, a little bit of this week going forward. Some great games coming up in Week 7. We'll see how those play. But thanks for tuning in. Go to our Instagram and TikTok. Follow and subscribe there, and then go to our website, footballtalksquadron.com, to find our podcast and other media channels. Thanks for tuning in. Time to pull chalks. We'll see you next week.